Hello and welcome to the first part of the Pose Masterclass. Hopefully by the end of 5 weeks, you just never have to worry about drawing poses ever again. Today I'm going to focus on breaking down my personal process for drawing a really intelligent stickman, because there's a lot of stuff out there and it's easy to get lost. Like, 'cause, the body's got hundreds of muscles and hundreds of bones, so it's like, what do I actually focus on to put it all together, right? And so I'm going to walk through my process, general proportions, and measurements to make sure that you can draw poses right from the start, and so that your foundation is nice and strong. So with that, let's get into the actual drawing part. So first things first, if you're starting to pose, today I'm just going to do like really flat stuff. Later I'll get into the actual dynamics, moving it around. This is all going to be straightforward. And so the first thing you want to do when you start a pose is just draw a line. This is exactly how I start every single pose that you've seen on any of my stuff. I always start with just a line, because a line's a really good way to just orient the spine. It'll make sense later, like, if characters are bent or curved, you draw the line in different ways. Once you have your line, I like to make a little midpoint right there, right? And then another midpoint, another midpoint. Because a lot of times when you look up how to draw poses, you see like all the head measurement stuff. But the problem is, once poses stop being in really linear positions, the head thing falls apart really quickly. Because if a character is at like a weird angle, suddenly you're trying to stack all the heads on top of each other, and it gets weird really. It just kind of starts making no sense. And so when you think in this linear kind of way, or sorry, with a line, it makes it much easier to get into the weirder stuff, because it's a much more reliable system to picture where to break the line up into smaller pieces. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat. Here we go. See the typing. Just gonna make sure this is all clicking so far, so I don't go too fast. Okay, go ahead. If you have any questions about, like as we go, that's fine. It'll help me steer things in the right direction, so I don't go off in random places and no one knows what I'm talking about. I want to make sure everybody is getting it. Yeah, the head is really kind of all over the place. So I like to always start with a line and then break it up into 4 equal sections, because it's really user friendly, and I personally have a hard time. Yeah, the heads are weird. The heads are really good for later to check your measurements as a sort of follow up. You might have seen that email that I sent where I kind of talked about this, but now I'm going to really dive into it. So you break it up into the 4 parts, and then what I like to do is then you draw your head, right? Just an egg shape. That's all it is. Just a rough shape. Don't get too particular about what a head shape should be just yet. You just want to lay in your generals, because the whole process for drawing good poses is you start rough, and little by little you add more and more form. And as you keep practicing, you can start to skip steps until, like, because when I actually draw a pose, I don't actually draw the line. I picture the line, right? I'll like make a head and then make a rib cage, and then there's the hips, and it's all just loose, and I'll kind of draw on the line, I'll sort of move through, but I'm like skipping things in my actual head. And so for the actual process, as we break it down, what I'm doing, once I have the line, I like to plot in general head shape, and then right at this line here, you do another head, right? This one's a little big. Let's make it a little smaller. You want to have about 3 ovals on the top half of the line. And this one up here is your head, this one is your rib cage, and this one is your hip area. Because one of the things when you draw humans, and I see this all the time, is people forget how much legs humans actually have, and they put the hip way too low. Humans are half legs. It's just a thing about being bipedal, I guess. It's just, you wouldn't think it. I guess we don't pay enough attention. But there's a lot down there. So once you have your 3 balls here, move on to the next step. You can erase a little bit, lighten the layer. And then what you want to do is you want to start to form out really important bones. The first one that's the most important, of course, is the skull, right? Humans are pretty useless without a head. Let's make that a little lighter so we can see a bit, right? And then you want to bring out the rib cage. And the rib cage is just a little bit wider than the head, right? Just a little bit. And then the hips, a hip is shaped kind of like this. And your really important landmark is up here. It's called the iliac crest. If you actually feel your body right now, you feel that big ridge near your belly button. That's your iliac crest, and that's a really good landmark for when you're drawing poses, because a lot of really important muscles attached to this crest here on both sides. And so with that in mind, you know, your crest is right here. You can even feel on yourself, like the bottom of your rib cage on the side. Iliac crest, it's a really short distance. Like rib cages actually come down quite a bit and hips come up quite high. And these are both really useful landmarks right here and right here. Your iliac crest right there, and then your hip has this kind of shape. It's almost like a chevron sort of shape. And with this, you have your 3 really important landmarks when you're drawing a body. On women, the hip comes out more like that, just because the whole baby birthing thing, they have really wide hips. If you look at the actual pelvises of human beings, male hips are quite narrow compared to female hips. You can, and especially the cavity in the middle, which total sense when you think about what hips are for, right? But we'll just keep this kind of androgynous for now. And so you have these 3 marks here. And then the next thing you want to do is you start to think about arms and legs, because you have your torso all set up. And so we know right here, you put in your shoulders and then your hip joints. And at this point, it's usually pretty straightforward. Everyone good so far? Yes, I'll get into the specifics of male versus female features a little later. But for now, I just want to make sure everyone has a really solid grasp of building a stickman, because if your stickman's bad, everything's going to fall apart. So you drop in your shoulders, right? Your hip and your ball joints, right? And then the next thing you want to do is now we start putting on all the various limbs and landmarks, because with this, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Like if I was to do a pose over here, right? And I draw on a head, I draw on a rib cage, right? Just loose rib cage, draw on the hips, right? You can see they're all kind of equal distance from each other. And then you drop in like a shoulder and a shoulder and a hip, a hip. Suddenly, it's really easy to just kind of like put in a leg or an arm and an arm. You see what I mean? Like this sort of central piece here really gives you a lot of flexibility for moving things around, because the limbs are really where people get lost, because arms and legs can go in all kinds of different directions, but your trunk and your head can't really do too much in terms of rotation and moving around. But without them in the right places, the limbs fall apart instantly. So as long as you focus on that, I would bet you it's pretty hard to get lost. Let's get rid of that and get back over here. So your next big landmarks, you can come down to your midway point here, would be a knee. So you put in like one here, and keep in mind that your femur, that's the big bone in your thigh, sits at this kind of angle like this. It doesn't go straight down, and it's really fat at the bottom, actually. You can, if you look at pictures of people or you try and feel around your own body, you'll feel that the big knuckle at the bottom of your femur wraps around the entirety of your knee. Like you should feel that bone on the sides of your leg. I mean, a lot of the time, a lot of this stuff is just sort of, you just kind of feel around yourself and just kind of see where stuff is. Because what you're doing with posing and anatomy is you're really getting like a really, like a micro degree in physiology or kinesiology. And you could even like study like bodybuilding a little bit, or how they think about muscles, because that'll give you a good idea of how to piece everything together, especially if you want to, like, I'll do an advanced anatomy one later after this pose thing, probably, and I'll get into all the things about insertions and all the way the muscles fit together, because when you think about the body in this really puzzle piece kind of way, it gets really hard to mess things up, because you know there's a limitation based on how the muscle attaches to the bone. But back to this part, we drop in our femurs, right? Big knuckles, go to the bottom of our line and put in some feet. And the feet are usually right under the shoulders, right? That's a healthy person. Feet should be under the shoulders. So you just put a little triangle there, down, right? You can just measure it. You can use your ruler, eyeball it. Over time, eyeballing will become more and more easy. And your shins have a slight curve to them. You want kind of like this. Just the slightest of curves. And you can see here with the hips, if it's like a female figure, this is more accentuated because the hip will be wider. This I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit for the sake of educational purposes, but I mean, this might be just a little tighter like that. And then we come to our arms. Between your rib cage and your hip, I want you to put a little line right here where the belly button goes, and this happens to be an excellent landmark for where the middle of the arm is, because your elbow tends to line up with about the bottom of your rib cage and the middle of your arm. And so you take one here to this midline, put a ball out here, straight down. Here, move that over a little bit. Straight down, that is the top of your arm, right? They do tend to flare out a little bit because they don't like sit right over your legs. Bring this up kind of wide. Right. Cool. Let's bring this in. This comes out a little bit. Right, and you can see I'm doing a lot of refining. You want to keep it loose in this stage because as you do it, you'll start to get a really good feel for where things should go. At this point, we've got most of our body done. We're looking pretty good. All we got to do is put in the forearm, and for a forearm landmark, you want to go mid-thigh, right in the middle. This is your next big landmark. Put in a hand, and the length of the hand is about 2/3 of the face. So if I go up here to the face and I do 2/3, right, there's my hand, and it goes there. It has a slight curve inwards, and we'll put the other hand in. And you can see as you make this process, you're just kind of using different parts of the body as you go as references for other lengths of how the body should look. Because the human bodies, while there's a lot of variation between person to person to person, there's also a very consistent, almost mathematical formula to how things are put together. And you'll find that the more studies you do, the more that people's bodies just start to kind of look the same, or at least adhere to this formula. And so the same thing here, as far as formulas, is you can use your face or the face you're drawing as a reference for how long the hand should be. And now we got our hands, and now we want to put on our forearms. And the forearm is, of course, off this little joint here. Put a slight curve. I like to come from the outside because the way the forearm actuates is that there's actually two bones inside your arm, and they kind of twist around each other. And there's a slight curve to them. So if this is like your elbow joint here, and this is your hand, you want to come from like the outside and then come in. And that'll help guide you when you put the forms on top. And also, like for instance, if this hand, like if this is a hand, right? If this hand were to turn this way, then you know that this part starts to move here. And so as the hand keeps rotating, right, you can see this is the back of the hand, right? How it just keeps rotating. And so putting this ball or this sort of rough forearm guide on the elbow when it rotates around as the arm rotates, it makes it really easy to keep track of where the muscles of the forearm should be and also the curve of the forearm itself. And so let's go back to our Stickman with that in mind and put that in place, right? And at that point, we pretty much have a pretty banging Stickman. This is going to be very, very easy, at least for my part, to put into all kinds of weird poses. And now we start getting to the fun part where you start to dress it up, right? So you just keep cutting it up into smaller chunks, and you add more and more detail as you go. So what's a good one next? Clavicle. Right here, above the rib cage, clavicle. And then we do some meat in between here, right? There's our torso. And that's pretty much your basic Stickman. So let's take all of this. Here we don't. Here. Actually, let's take a little pause right here and ask everybody, is that making sense? Everything's nice and clear. We're rocking. I love it. Okay, so with our Stickman here, now comes the fun part. Once you have a Stickman, you move to form. And I'm going to grab, let's do some blue. No, I like red. Right? And then the next step is, of course, to add form. And so we have our head, of course, right? Actually, let's keep using black. Red's a little too bold. We want to make sure everything's nice and clear. So, right, your head's still here. Don't worry about the face just yet. People like to get into the face right away. it's just kind of a human trait where we're like, the face is the most important thing because the face is how we get emotion from people and how we get cues and narrative and all that good stuff. But if you place too much importance on the face, it's first going to make it like a really strong focal point when you're trying to draw a body, and a body should be seen as like a holistic unit. You don't want to get lost in eyes and noses and ears when your shoulders and elbows and hands are all over the place and the overall form doesn't make sense or flow. So at this point, don't think about the face too much. You can kind of, if you want, you can just block in a rough idea where the eyes should be, about halfway up the face. And then at this point, you start thinking about clothing or muscle. We'll just do this one in the nude because muscles are the hard part. Or I guess clothing too, but clothing goes in so many directions because, you got t-shirts and dresses and all that stuff. So using this landmark right here, you can draw in your neck muscles. I believe it's the sternocleidomastoid. I know Ray knows that one. He told me that. I forgot the name of it. And then from here, just a little bit above your rib cage, go the pecs. And those come down like this, right? And then you have your collarbone right here. You can see here. And the collarbone has this kind of like the slight curve to it. You like look at a skeleton, you'll see. And the reason why is because as you move your collarbones back, this curve is here so it doesn't actually crush your neck. And so as you like move your shoulder blades back, the collarbone is meant to wrap around all that important stuff inside your neck. So clearly nature is really intelligent when it comes to this stuff. And because nature's so intelligent, there's a slight curve to your collarbone. So come down like that, right? There's your collarbone. But we don't need it so aggressive. And then there's your shoulder right there. And then there's, of course, this muscle in the back. That is the trap. And I will actually break down these muscles in more detail as we go. I'm just kind of showing you how to add the form. If you're feeling less confident about muscles, you can start with blocking out more form first. So if I just turn this off, and I'll kind of show you real quick. If you don't know deltoids from pecs, from quads, what you want to do here is just kind of start breaking it out into rough forms, right? You want to block them out into these kinds of cylindrical shapes, and that'll give you good ideas of where things should be. Almost like those, I'm sure we see those wooden puppets that are used for posing. You kind of build your own little puppet here, right? Build your puppet. And tip for the legs, don't put meat around it. The meat of the leg goes against the femur. So this bone at the top sits against the meat. So it just comes like straight down. And this is actually a really easy cue to show feminine bodies, actually, because women have very prominent ball joints on the sides of their hips. Men don't. Women do. And so down here, right, this is a really just quick version of adding some form. Don't get too precious. It's very easy at this stage to get too precious. I made that a little too far over. These kinds of things with correction will come with practice, where you'll just kind of see it and go, that doesn't look right. And you tweak it, right? And I made these just a little too far to the side. So, right, there's a rough idea of like adding form. Right? And then from there, you could then make this rough one, make this rougher, and then come to the actual muscle stage. Now that you have an idea of where the actual cylinders of the meat would be. And so where we were on the shoulder. And so shoulder, right? And then I like to do the bicep. And I don't want to get too lost in the muscle weeds here because this goes on forever. But with this pose, Stickman, that'll be pretty straightforward. Right? So let's actually get into what are some really important muscle and bone cues for your actual Stickman. So this one here is just to kind of show you drawing on top. This is just that on top. So let's draw our Stickman here. I don't know why this is so wide. Oh, good. All right. So important anatomy. This is part 2. Now that we have our Stickman, not our Stickman. Did make that a little wide. Yep. Group. is. All right. So let's start by mapping out really important muscles. Because you don't want to learn all the muscles, you just want the basics, right? You don't need all of them. So we'll red here, bring it in. Again, don't get precious with the face, right? If you're doing important stuff, an ear is a good landmark. The first one here is, as I mentioned, is the sternocleidomastoid, right here. That's a very prominent muscle. Don't worry about the rest of the muscles in the neck. It's just that one. And the general shape of a neck would be like, if this is the chin up here, is you right here have this big muscle that comes down. Really big, big, strong muscle. And this is the general shape of it. That's all you need to worry about, right? This is the big muscle right here. This stuff you can just kind of fill in. Don't get too worried about it. Unless you want to get really advanced with your poses, you don't need to know about that. Okay, back to important muscles. The next big important muscle is the pecs. And they have a shape kind of like this, right? Because here, the muscle will attach to the front of the rib cage, and up here the muscle is attaching to the humerus, I'm pretty sure. And there's actually 3 parts to it. But that's its shape. It's got this kind of squarish shape to it. Your next really important muscle is the deltoid. Right there. And that has this kind of shape to it. And this part up here attaches to the scapula, I'm pretty sure, and this part right here is the humerus. If these bones don't make sense, I'm going to do the other half in a second, and they should all come together. Right there. So then you have the, let's just call this the neck. You have the pec. This one's called the deltoid. The shoulder. Let's make the actual, let's use simple names. I'm just putting these actual muscle hair names, so if you want to go look into more detail and delve into it, you can. So, shoulder. And then your next big one is your bicep. And behind the bicep is a tricep, which we'll get into a little later. That one's behind there. This is just to show you the important muscles to focus on. Because there's, I noticed just hanging out on the internet, there's endless guides and little like, you know, 1-image tutorials on the muscles. And I could see how it would be very easy to sort of get lost in what muscles to focus on. When you're drawing bodies, you don't need to like know that there's 3 heads to a tricep. You just don't need to know that. So when you learn these things, what I'm trying to show you here is what you can actually focus on to get the biggest bang for your buck as soon as possible. Like when you do a forearm, right? There's like 12 or 14 muscles in a forearm. You only need to really know about one. And there's this big fat one over the top that I forget the name of because it's really long in Latin. I think it's like called the brachioradialis or something like that. That's all you need to focus on. Like when you draw a forearm, you can focus all the muscles, or you can just kind of draw this big one over the top. And then when you add your form, you just kind of put that slight curve to it because, you know, there's a big muscle here and then there's some stuff over here. And honestly, you can just kind of make this part up to the forearm because there's so many muscles in there. Control the hand. So this is, I'm going to just do this. If someone wants to correct me, feel free, but I'm pretty sure it's the brachioradialis. And you know what? I'm going to rename it. If that's not the name, too bad. That's the new name now. In your hand, we're not going to get into hands because hands are actually really complicated. Anyways, now back to the front. Important muscles as we draw our midline. Is abs. And your abs actually come all the way down from under your pecs, all the way down to your groin area. And, you know, here we're going to block in the 6-pack. There, boop, boop, right? And there's the groin area. And then your other really important one is the oblique, which comes to the top of that iliac crest I was talking about, like right here, right? That iliac crest. And it comes in and then comes down into the groin area. And then you have what some people call the hip dip, which is this section here, like this triangle that just sits over your hip. And that is the lower part of the pelvis here and the ball joint of your femur there. And then from there, we come down. I like to start usually around this area and bring it down to the knee. This is your quad. Oh, I didn't label your ab. 0 oblique. Right, cool. All labeled and good. And then from the inside of the groin to the outside of the leg, this is your hamstring. Here, I'm kind of making, there's too many labels, right? Or at least it's a part of the hamstring. Call it the inner thigh if you want. And then your knee, of course. And then your shin, which has sort of this, like, there's a big one in the front and then one on the side. Kind of just think of it like that. And your feet, right? We'll just call this the calf. It's like the forearm has a lot of stuff down there. But these, if you go to study muscles, this is all you need to know. And you could do your entire figure drawing career with just these muscles. If you learn the major shapes of these, you're good. Don't worry about anything else. So let's go to the other side for the bones. I guess I should stop first. And like, is everybody following along? All makes sense so far? Okay, good. So I'm going to go over the important bones. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our Stickman and show them from the side and the back view and kind of do a quick once over to show you all these super important landmarks. That way you know exactly what to focus on and what to practice. Because I thank you, Ocean. That's awesome. That's super cool. So let's see, how's this? That's an okay color. Do we like this blue? I like this blue. That's cool. Good. I want everybody to walk out of this with the coolest, most sickest pose drawing skills ever. There's all our reds. Turn this down a bit. Here we go. Nice light. This is, let's name these layers. Muscles, and here's important. Bones. Okay, so, of course, you got your skull. And that one's landmark, because you wouldn't need to worry about the landmark too much. The skull. Ooh. No one's going to be doing, unless you want to draw skeletons, but that's its own thing. First really important landmark is, of course, clavicle. Again, has that shape I mentioned before, like that. Then you have, behind it is the scapula, but we'll get into that. Rib cage, super important. Don't worry about the ribs themselves, just the rib cage. It's this big shape like that. It actually comes down quite low on the side and then comes up like that. Spines, whatever. Really important is the hip. One way to think about the hip, instead of like, you know, like, let's see, actual hip itself does this, and then there's the joints over here, and then it opens up. You don't need to worry about all that like specific stuff. When you think of a hip, think of a bucket. Kind of like that. Like this is sort of flat on top, then this part is curved, and here you have the actual leg come out. Because the thing about the hip is it doesn't sit flat, it tilts, which we'll see in a second when I get into the actual profile and rear view Stickman. But for now, this is just the important bone, pelvis, right? I should be labeling these as I go. So yeah, here we have the skull. Super important. We all love our skulls, don't we? Halloween would be terrible without them. This is a clavicle. This is a rib cage. Your pelvis. I feel like I'm in a biology class right now. And then moving on, we don't need to worry about the spine too much right here. Is this one here. This fella is your humerus. And that's a fun name because when you hit your funny bone, it's actually you've hit a nerve at the end of your humerus. That's why it's funny. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Next, in your forearm, there's two bones. They are your radius and your ulna. Ulna. There's two there. And they're the ones that rotate against each other, like I mentioned earlier. There's, like, for instance, there is in your hand, like when you draw a hand, right? Knuckles. That's a your thumb, but whatever. Just yeah, great thumb, great thumb. Right, this is your hand. Here's your fingers, whatever, and then here's your forearm. There's a little bump right here. That's actually the end of your ulna, and this is called the pisiform ulna. I believe it's pronounced like that. Please don't quote me. And that's because the bone is sitting right here with the little end of it, right? And that little bump is a great way to show everybody that you know a lot about anatomy. Because all you're really doing when you do poses is you're just sort of studying anatomy a lot and then measuring things against each other, and then you just draw it. So hand bones, not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into that. That's its own lecture. Hands are a doozy. We're just going to write down hand and pretend like that is all of it. Yeah, the thing about that bump on the hand is you don't want to make it too strong. It's a really subtle, like here's the side of the hand and there's the pisiform. Super, super subtle. There's a lot of these things why the form is important is like when you do an arm, you don't want to do like, unless you're doing like Dragon Ball Z, you don't want to like put in all of the shoulder and then this really meaty section. Like when you do a shoulder, you just kind of want the gentle flow of there's a shoulder and then oh, there's a bicep. And you do these really subtle little changes in the direction of your line. Let's see, where was it? Oh, yes. Going down the important bones. So, next one is your femur. And that one, it's in the hip and then comes out and then comes across with this big knuckle. The general shape of it is it has like it, I know, sorry, I should do this a little lower. But it has this big joint and then it connects into the hip pelvis itself and then comes down with this big fat knuckle. That's what a femur looks like. And that's a really important bone. We love our femurs. And then, of course, you have your patella, is your kneecap. I'm just going to write cap. And then from there, we have... This is your tibia and fibula, or is it tibia and fibula? I always confuse them. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the... You know what? It's the tib and the fib. Perfect. Tibia, fibula, tibia, tibula. It's like some kind of riddle that some Latin biologist came up with. We're going to go just tib and fib. Right? We all know what we're talking about. And then, of course, you've got your foot. Boop, 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 boop. And that kneecap is a little low for my tape. Right? Want to bring that up. We want a really well-balanced person. Okay, so there maps out your super important bones and muscles. When you go to study things later, because I encourage you to study and practice, this is what you focus on. Everything else is just noise if you're starting out. You don't need to worry about the foreheads of the quadricep or the serratus muscles or the 3 different parts of the pec. That's all just noise. You don't need it because you got to, like, you ever heard of the... Yeah, no, you don't. Exactly. You just need to know enough to tell people what you want to tell people with your art, right? So here are all these super important landmarks. And with that in mind, let's revisit our, let's just turn this fella off. And let's go back to our Stickman. And I actually, to make this a little more streamlined, I dropped this fella in here, which I made recently. So we can just drop in all the important parts. Because as you practice, you should start just taking humans and draw the Stickman on them. And then draw the important bones on them. And then draw the important muscles on them. And that way you'll start to integrate where everything should go and how things should feel. Because a big part about art is it's almost like you learn a language. You'll kind of know when the pronunciation's off. You know that this word doesn't go there. You should have conjugated this verb that way. It's the exact same thing with this. The more you interact with poses and practice and study humans, you'll start to get this sort of extra sense of like when things don't feel right, when the proportions are off. And it's the exact same thing. So let's block in our back, front, and face here. I'm going to just walk through this because there's more to the human body than just the front, right? I know for myself, I spent a lot of time neglecting backs. So let's go through the process of drawing poses real quick with these 3. you can kind of see what it would look and feel like, right? So if I'm doing a front one here, and this is just here so you can see how I math it out, is again, start with your line, do a halfway point, it's right about there, right? Do another one, and you can see these landmarks on the body as I go. Like right here, that's about the bottom of the rib cage from the front. This one here, bottom of the groin. This one here, right about mid to bottom of kneecaps. Again, you don't have to be too precise with these. These are just kind of guidelines because people are different enough person to person that if you're like, put your kneecaps a little low or a little high, no one's really going to go like, hey, your kneecaps are in the wrong spot. I'm not following anymore, right? And so with your landmarks in mind, let's go to the top and draw a head, right? Just a loose head. You can see how it maps on. And then here we have this midpoint. Yeah, so you just drop the line and then break them into quadrants. So like, we can get into it in the Q&A. Just save that one and I'll get in the actual like really specific landmarks. Right now I just want to plot out the front, side, and back views to show you all the important muscles and bones. You know where things are supposed to go. So, right. So you have your line. Clean that up. Right, you do your egg. And I mean, if this is a place where you can use your heads, right? Where you can have about 3.5 to 4 heads up here. If you want to check your actual measurements. So when you drop your head in, here, I'll do it on a separate layer. Check, right? If I draw a head, just this loose oval. All right, there's 1, 2, 3, and you can see there, that's about 3.5 heads, right? I guess I didn't put the heads right up against each other, so it's not super accurate. There we go. Right, that's 3.5 heads. So let's get rid of all these heads we dropped in. Put that back and go back to mapping out our dude. So you drop in your head. Again, about 3.5 heads. This part changes a lot because smaller characters have less heads. Your characters have smaller heads. Pardon, slight distraction. So from the heads, come to this line, and this is where your rib cage goes, right? Again, you just start with this. But as you progress, you'll just start dropping in the rib cage. Like it's a rib cage, right? You just kind of drop it in. If you want the actual process, right, we'll put in the head here, the same size, another head here, the same size. Go to your landmark, here's your rib cage. Come down, fatten it out, right? Lots of loose lines. Don't get precious. Do not, do not, do not. And with that, we have our 3 big, important landmarks. What's the next thing you do? You drop in some shoulders, drop in some hips, then your midline here, and then just start filling in the body, right? Come back down to this one, drop in your knees, put in your femurs. One's kind of facing forward, comes down. This one's on the outside, comes down, right? Bottom, where our feet go. Here, precious. There's the actual process. And then we come down to this midline, right? And then here we can put sides of our arms. Humerus. Humerus, remember that trick I told you with the curve of the hand and the forearm? This one has this curve to it, and this one has a little less of a curve because the arm is rotated slightly inward. Drop that in. Hands. Right, come in, hands. And remember, your hand should be about mid-thigh, right? With the fingers fully extended. With your fingers fully extended, they come to about mid-thigh. This one's a fist, this one's extended. And then with that, there's your stickman, right? Super great. Let's come over to our side one. Same thing. The line, this is why I want to do the side one, is you can see that the line goes from the top of the head down. Right? Should have put that on this other layer. so that this Photoshop file makes sense for people later. There we go. Now, when you're doing the head from the side, it's not really an egg anymore. It kind of does this sort of circle shape like that, because the skull, of course, has a jaw, right? Here's your teeth. Here's your jaw, your eye, right? There's a skull. Oh, plotting it from the side. You have your cool skull. We'll just slap that on top. There we go. Hey, look at that. It's perfect. And your line should be in line with where the jaw connects to the skull itself. And then as you do this process, come back to your line, right? About midway, about there. Do another one halfway, about there. Another one halfway, about there. And then it's the exact same process. Now we're from the side. So we want another loose head here, another loose head here. Come back to our line. We know that's where the rib cage goes. It comes down, right? There's our rib cage. And remember when I mentioned that bucket for the hip? This is where that comes in play, because from the front, you kind of see this, right? But from the side, tilts. So you get this kind of shape, right? The bucket tilts forward, and that's why we like to think of hips as buckets, right? So there's our hip, right? Dropping our spine. Remember that the spine doesn't do this. It actually starts from this point here. Let me turn down the line. Put our skull back in. When you do the spine, it comes from here, from the base of where the skull and the jaw meet. You can probably feel it in the back of your head if you want. When in doubt, just feel around your own body and you'll kind of get an idea of where things should be. This comes down like so and has a slight curve like this. Don't draw it like this. Don't draw it like this. It's going to look like they have something wrong with them. And we don't want that, right? Then we do the rest of the spine like this. It sits at the back. And then what's the next part? You drop in your shoulders and your hips. See how this process just keeps going over and over? It's just, I promise you, it's not going to stop. The more you drop poses, the more you're going to keep putting in shoulders and hips and shoulders and hips and shoulders and hips. So put in our hips. It's kind of towards the back a bit of the hip where the femur connects. And then the same with the shoulder. And then we put our humerus. Remember the midline here, right? Where we do in between this line. Getting a little busy, but there's this line here and this line here. Go in between, about there. That's your belly button. Follow it across, and the arm is raised here. But if, like, I take this guy, I were to drop his arm, you'll see that it pretty much falls in line, right? You can see it's pretty in line with where the belly button would be. But the arm is raised, so you can see the side of the body. That back. I guess you can think of it like that. And then we do our joint. Remember that it comes from the outside. And there's our hand. And then we do our knees, of course. And now there's no actual, like, once you put in your rib cage, your skull, and your hips, and throw in your shoulder and your ball joint, you don't have to go arms first or legs first. Or you can just kind of go as you're comfy, whatever feels good to you, because everyone has a different process. I've seen some artists where they like to start from the rib cage and build out from that, and like sometimes do the head last. I like to always start with the line in the head. That's just how I learned. You're gonna, as you do this, find out what's comfortable for you. I just want to emphasize there is no right way to draw a thing. In terms of process, there's kind of a right way to make human bodies, because if you deviate too much, it won't look like a human body to other people. But the process is whatever makes sense to you. With that in mind, back to where we go. I like to do the arms and then the legs. So we have our arm in, we have our ball joint for the hip. Then we do our knees, sitting right on top of that line right there. There's our knee. Boom. Just sitting on top, nice and gentle. So let's go here. Draw in our femur. Then we go to the bottom of our line. Boom. Drop in some feet. Right? Feet have a kind of, from the side, this sort of like triangle and square sort of thing. You could also think of it here too for the toes. Something to keep in mind with feet is it's not straight down. If you look at a person from a profile, the shins actually kind of come underneath like that. It's because all of this system, the human body, is designed to, of course, be load bearing. Because from like here up, you know, I'm a 200-pound person. That's 100 pounds of weight just sitting on my legs like all day that I'm walking, right? So the human body is designed to actually disperse and kind of carry this load like a little bit of a spring. So it's all sort of stacked in a really kind of springy sort of way so that we don't wear ourselves out even faster. Because can you imagine if like your legs were like this all the time, just all that weight on your knee all day, you know, if you're walking or standing or at a job or something. So remember, the body is not like this. It has this kind of like S curve to it. And with that in mind, we come down here, right? And we do this sort of face like this. In fact, on some people, when they're standing real naturally, the foot might be even further back. It might be kind of like this almost. Where like the ear is almost over mid-foot. That's really common when people are standing, especially people with good posture. So we'll keep that in mind. And yeah, sure, there. That is side view. Now let's come. Actually, first I'll stop. Does that make sense? Everyone's following? Have a sip of water while everyone lets me know. Refreshing. Good, 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 good. Now, onto the back. I might have to go a little over the hour to show you some of the bones and stuff because I didn't show you the backbones. I'm sure we're all okay with that. Everyone's cool. Hang on. Remember, start your line. Whoop. Yep. There. Go halfway. 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 That's not quite halfway, is it? Oh, that's more like halfway. No, wait. I'm either drunk, stoned, or both. Sorry. That's not halfway. That's about halfway. Yeah, okay. Like I have a guide underneath. You'd think I'd like pay attention to what I'm doing, right? It's about halfway, halfway, halfway. I could pop out a ruler and measure it, but that would waste so much time. So, think in your heads. What comes first? Drop a head in, right? Egg shape. Egg shape, egg shape, egg shape. As always, you can check to make sure that it has the right amount of distance from here to here. 3 to 4 heads. 3.5 is pretty golden. When you think of the skull from the back, you remember like this shape where it does this. So the skull from the back, you want to think of a ball, and then it kind of has this cleft here, and then the jaw comes down. Like there's this sort of almost flat section there. It's in that little pocket right there where the spine comes out. So with that in mind there, little pocket, spine comes out. Remember your other heads, another head, another head. Start plotting things in. So we have our skull, we have the kind of back of it where our spine connects, spine comes down. This line here is for the front of the rib cage. So when you do the back, you're gonna have to just kind of go down a bit. I like to think about kind of the bottom of this circle is where the rib cage is, like, you know, our middle circle. I do our rib cage, right? Bigger, pretty, make it pretty. We want to impress people with how good we are at art. Come down here, here's our hip. Remember, it's tilting forward a little bit, right, for our bucket. Looking at the back of the bucket. And now say it with me. Say it loud in your room. What comes next? Shoulders and hips, right? Ball, 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 ball. Shoulders and hips. Thank you. And we have our shoulders and hips in. We're halfway there. What comes next? Remember the midline between this line, because you can't really see it from the back. You have to just imagine between there and the bottom of the hips, there's a midline right here. And you'll notice it's about the bottom of that head that we put in, right? So that is where we're going to put in our elbows. The arms are flared a bit, so go a little bit higher. Humerus, humerus. Go to mid-thigh, or between here and here, these two lines, about mid-thigh. where hands would go, right? Actually, a little low. Oh, right. These hands are actually, I drew these hands a little high. You'll have to excuse me. That is just super embarrassing. The arms are flared out a little bit, but they're a little high. Just if anybody asks, I did it perfectly. You'll all lie for me, right? So these hands should be a little lower. Remember to come from the outside. A little lower. For our fists, come from the outside. Boom. Come down to our buddy down here for this quadrant. Put our knees on top. And boom. Remember from the outside because of the hip. Boom, boom. Bottom of the line. Feet, I'm kind of going a little faster now because I'm hoping you guys are kind of picking up the rhythm here. This is just, every pose is this sort of the same thing. It doesn't like get different at any point. You just do this forever. How can be an artist? You should get some jobs drawing people and just doing this over and over and over. And there's our back. Right? So, turns fell off. We have our general pose. Let me take a few minutes to slap in the important bones on the side and the back, along with the muscles. We have to go 10 minutes over. I apologize. No. On. Let's cover impotent muscles from the back and impotent bones. So as far as the side, let's actually start with the back first, because the back and the front happen at the same time on the side. So where did I put our important stuff? Yeah. So back. Cool. So drawing our midline, here is the skull. Right? We remember the skull. And then you have this shape here, which is your scapula. And the scapula is a really weird bone. It'd be fun. You should have some fun and go look up in like 3D medical models what they look like, because it's got like these 3 knobs on it, and I don't know how it sits in there so comfortable, but it does. And a lot of muscles connect to it. It's a really important bone. But you can of course see scapulas on people's backs moving around all the time. So super important bone for landmarks and showing people what's going on under the skin. And of course, there's the back of the rib cage. Things. You can't see the clavicle. The spine is important in the back because you can see it. So the spine comes down, right? Spine is very visible from the back, but not from the front. And of course, we have the humerus again. That's right here. Then we have the radius and the ulna once more. And which talking about, right, here's radius, ulna. Do I need to label the rib cage again? Sure. Don't worry, I will give you guys all of these files and images. You can review them to your heart's content. And we have the hips from the back, and the bucket shape is just fine for this. Because people's gluteuses, that's your butt, are very big muscles, and you don't see much of the hip from the back because butts are so big. It's one of the real defining features of humans. Like if you were to ask me what's the most important features on a human, it's long legs and a big butt. That's really what makes humans look human. So this is your pelvis. And you have your femur once again. Big knuckle. And you can't see the patella from the back. So we'll just go right to the tib and fib because I'm still not sure if it's tibia or fibula or tibia or fibula, fibia or tibia. Honestly, I can't remember. One of the funny things about this is you'll sit down and study all of these bones and all of these muscles, and then once you're like, yeah, I got the shape, you just start forgetting the names. Like, I don't need to know that the neck muscle is sternocleidomastoid. I need to know how it's shaped so I can draw it, right? And I would say on the back of the foot, actually, let's not get into the feet. I almost got carried away there, and it's just off we go to the bone land, right? So here are your super important bones from the back. Let's do the muscles. You, of course, have your neck, your head. This one on the neck is the trapezius muscle, or the traps, right? Your traps. they have this shape kind of like that on both sides. They're those big, like those big muscles just behind the neck that connect to the shoulders. They have that general shape, so traps are super important. You have this one here, which is the teres muscles. There's a teres major and a minor, and you can really get into it, but teres is fine. You, of course, have the deltoid from the back, because there are three, count them, 3 heads to the deltoid. Pardon. Another super important muscle is your tricep. What you see from the back. Then you have this elbow here, and then you have your forearm again. You can't really see the brachioradialis from the back. It's kind of there, but again, forearm, you can just kind of fake a bit. If you really want to sit down and like study all 12 muscles, I'll do that at some later point where we actually like break down all the parts of the forearm, but that is neither here nor there right now. And whatever, they got fingers. Next important muscle would be your lats, or this big muscle that do this. The latissimus dorsi, the proper term. Then you have here a really important muscle is the erector muscles. I think it's the spinous erector. Some people call them the erector muscles. Hopefully that my writing is nice and legible. Let's do that proper. Erector. Then here we have your butt. And your butt connects this way. That's how there's actually 2 parts to it. It's like that. But we'll just draw this kind of square for your glutes or your butt muscles. And then right here on the side, that's your obliques again. I have too much writing, don't I? Your obliques, that's not gonna fit. Then you have your hamstrings. Come down near the back of the leg. Call them your hammies. And on the front here, connecting at the top of the iliac crest again, right there is your quad. You can sort of see it on the side, sort of see it from the back. It sort of wraps around the front. It's a big muscle. Quads are your biggest muscle group. And of course you have your calf, which has this kind of shape like that. I'm not going to get too into like the shapes and the particulars. This is just so you know what the important parts are to study, right? So that when you go and draw your poses and you want to draw a guy that looks jacked, these are the muscles you focus on. It's nice and clear. That should probably be more right. And then we come down. Remember, there was that big bone on the front. It's really prominent. What? That is a map of the really important muscles and bones from the back. And we're 4 minutes over. Don't tell your moms. Let's do. Tell your mothers and your fathers and your grandparents and your cousins and your brothers and your sisters. Just don't tell them. Anybody asks, I was super on time, but I want to be thorough with this. I want to make sure you guys understand all the bones and the muscles, and hopefully everyone's got a nice chill Saturday waiting for them, so it's okay if we go over by 10 minutes. All right, let's run through the muscles and the bones real quick. So the skull, we'll do the bones first, right? There's your skull, your neck, your clavicle, rib cage, humerus, scapula. Oh, right. You're not in my country. Rib cage, spine, your hip, right? Hopefully this is all starting to click now. Just a little bit. Patella, tibia and fibula, foot, right? There's the bones. All pretty straightforward. Kind of a weird hip. The hip kind of comes down like that, but we'll just stick with the bucket. And then for the muscles from the side, because we like muscles, your deltoid, neck, there's the sternocleido, pecs come across like that, bicep, tricep, the brachioradialis kind of comes off the tricep, like you have, there's actually one in between, but whatever. There's the tricep, there's the bicep, and then you have your brachioradialis comes off like that onto the forearm. Brachio, there's the tricep, there's the bicep, and your elbow's in there, your hand. So that comes across, there's that. Then we have, your lat is a little visible from the side. This fella right here, right? It's just kind of right there. And then we have your abs, which have this kind of like, they come out like that. That's the shape of your abs. Like this is your belly button. There's that little pooch everybody has, myself included. You can get as lean as you want. It's always going to be there. Definitely clicking. Good. I want it to click. I want you guys to get this because drawing is a lot of fun when you get it. So there's the abs. Like I mentioned, they have this sort of sheet. Remember that your obliques, which are right here, they end at the top of the pelvis. So that should come down like this, and they come down into the groin. And you can put a line here if you want. This is what's called the serratus muscles in there. Those are probably important from the side. The serratus muscles. Let's label things. I think we're about done here. I can cover the male-female differences next week at the start of it before I get into the actual practicing of poses. Actually, you know what? I'll put those probably in week 4 in creating your own poses because you got guys like how you want to create characters. So I'll cover those in week 4, the male-female differences. This is your obliques. Pecs. The sternocleidomastoid, your neck, right? Clavicles. Deltoid. So many labels, eh? We could probably just leave the arm as is, or what? Oh, we could turn that off. Perfect. I was running out of room there. There's your bicep. Tricep. Brachio, etc. Radialis. The obliques are labeled. Abs are labeled. There it is. Okay, so we have that whole hip dip thing right there. You will see butts from the back. They stick out quite a bit, especially if you've been sprinting a lot. So this one here is your glutes. And then remember from the top of the iliac here, we come down to the knee. That forms our quad. These are quads. The quadriceps. Of course, you got your hams in the back. From the side, which way the leg is rotated will change which one you see. Just remember the front of the leg is the quads, the back is the hams. The thigh actually has a ridiculous amount of muscles in it. Like if you go look at a bodybuilder's legs, it's just like a maze. But I wouldn't worry about that just yet. Just focus on, like, you know, you have a quad and a ham, and just start there. Of course, your patella, then we have the front, the shin, and then we have calf muscle. Front of the shin is really just the bone. I believe it's the tibia. I really should have looked. I should look that up. But that there is the gist. And of course, if you got a guy, you know, he's got his bits, and that is pretty much. Yeah, the names are forgetting it, but that is pretty much the basics of posing and building a really strong stickman, which let's go back through. Here he is. These are stickmen that I use these all the time, and ever since I figured out thinking about stickmen like this, it has been night and day for drawing poses. And then with this in mind, we're going to take this guy, this stickman right here, into next week, and I'll show you how to take references of live people and apply this stickman to it, and then of course apply all of these important muscles so you can see where things are. I'll probably take some pictures of some bodybuilders or something and show you how you can take a reference. That's how you should be learning, and pull all the important information from it and start to build that visual library of how the body moves, where the pieces are, where the bones are, and hopefully in time with this framework here, you can make a lot of progress real fast and make poses just nothing but fun. And then never ever use my poses ever again. You can just come by in the Discord and say hi. With that, I suppose that is the end of the first week. Let's move into the question and answer phase, which I think most of you guys here would be in the question and answer phase. Okay, so I'll wrap it up there. and we'll move into the other room, and then you guys can ask me questions for the next hour about anything that's still bugging you, and I want to get you all sorted out so it's all just beautiful. Cool. Peace.